Okay, hello everyone. I guess you can hear me. Can someone dance? Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. And it's a pleasure for me to introduce our second speaker of the iGGi conference, or second keynote speaker for the iGGi conference. So, well, this is someone that we all know, or most of us know. She's an iGGi alumni who graduated this year, actually. So prior to that, she was at the University of Essex. She obtained a BSc and MSc Computer Games degree from there. And then she did her iGGi PhD at Essex first, then at Queen Mary on game playing AI agents, in particular using Roy Horizon evolution methods, and also working on general video game playing. So she was doing her PhD writing lots of papers, and she finally graduated this year, and now she's a lecturer in game AI at Queen Mary. She's teaching game development and AI, and doing research on general video game playing, evolutionary algorithms, and tabletop games, which is actually what she's going to talk about at the moment. So I'll just shut up and leave the virtual floor to you.
I should also unmute. Hi. Let me bring up my slides. Okay. I hope people can hear me. I cannot see people anymore, but this is a talk on tabletop games and AI, and also my iGGi PhD. I guess that is particularly relevant at this conference. I'm technically on holiday this week, so I wasn't able to catch most of the conference. I hope everyone is having a good time, and I'll make sure to catch up with recordings later on. I'm very curious how things have been going. But a little bit about me. I'm saying hello from the other side now, having graduated. And as Diego has mentioned, I've had a BSc and MSc in computer games at the University of Essex, where I also started doing my iGGi PhD before moving to Queen Mary in 2017. And I've had my PhD awarded now in May of this year, so they're all very recent. And since June 2021, I am now a lecturer in games and AI at Queen Mary University of London. My PhD was in running Horizon evolutionary algorithms for general video game playing, but that's not actually what I'm going to be talking about today. And I want to start this talk by talking a little bit about my experience during my PhD, and going sort of year by year with a few interesting things and summary of my experience here. I wasn't sure if I was going to actually include numbers of papers and things I've been doing, because I don't know, this can come off as bragging at some point, but I think we should be celebrating each other's successes a lot more. So I want to share here the full details of my experience and a positive experience of that. So in my first year as an iGGi PhD, we've had our modules on game design, development, and research skills. And from those modules, I've actually had some publications coming out. So I've had 2 publications from 2 different modules that I've taken, with 7 of them in total, and 4 being first author publications. I had the opportunity to travel to the Netherlands, Spain, and New York. I've had one major crisis of I want to radically change my topic. I don't know why I'm doing this anymore, so I'm going to be doing something else. I fortunately had a great team supporting me and telling me that it's fine to have crises occasionally, and got over that. At the first iGGi conference, one notable figure I've met was Tom Scholl. And I guess some other things happened, but I don't really remember because it was the very first one. I was very nervous. I had no idea what was happening. And there was also a global game jam that I participated in, where the Penguin Games tradition started. So this was a little penguin sort of prototype game that was never quite finished, but it was quite fun. The story of a little penguin that doesn't actually know how to swim. So if you fall into the water, he just dies. Um, In my second year, there were local modules taking place, and I've had 5 more publications, one more of those being from one of the modules that I had to take as training part of the iGGi program as well. And I've had one of my papers nominated for Best Paper Award at IEEE as well. There were 2 crises this year where I wanted to quit my PhD. I didn't know what I was doing anymore. Those were also figured out successfully. Um, I've had an internship, a great time at Microsoft Research Cambridge. And I've also had the opportunity to go to the very first Game AI summer school that was organized. So I traveled to Greece, the Netherlands, and Canada. And there was also a second iGGi conference where I probably was equally as nervous because that's also a bit of a blur there. Um, and during the Global Game Jam, there were more penguins. This was another game that was definitely left as a very basic prototype where the idea was that the player would be getting signals through sounds of where the blocks in the level were going to be. So they would have to use these auditory signals to be able to um, advance through the game. And in my third year, that was the time, sort of the last year before the pandemic started and messed everything up. So there were quite a lot of applications and collaborations with various people that I was very grateful to. Um, I had an amazing time traveling to Hawaii for a AAA conference. I was part of organizing various conferences, and I skipped the Global Game Jam this year. There were no penguins, sadly, because it overlapped with one of my travels. And in the fourth year, that was when everything started getting messed up. Um, there were 7 publications again with 4 first author, including a publication on our tabletop games framework called TAG. And that's part of the talk today. Um, I've had only one crisis of I'm never going to finish my PhD thesis. That is a very long journey that finally, fortunately, did finish successfully. Um, I was going to travel to San Francisco, Japan, and Canada, but that was all cancelled due to the COVID pandemic. But there was a game jam just before that where more penguins happened. This was another little fun prototype where the idea was that the penguin was now in this dice shaped world with 12 sides, and you'd have to sort of jump around, collect the trees. All of them would play different sounds, and you'd have to figure out what is the correct sequence of sounds to play at the end to make the world green and happy again. And then there was a time for just writing my PhD thesis that was submitted about 4 months into what was actually my 5th year of the PhD, so a little bit delayed there. So as a sort of overall summary of my PhD journey, I wanted to bring up some takeaways where I strongly encourage all the new students starting now to do a lot of tinkering, try things out, break things. You're going to learn by doing most of all. Collaborate, do take any chance to work with others and learn from others. Travel a lot as much as you can. Hopefully things will start opening up again and that will be an option. Say yes to things when you get different opportunities, go for those. Ask for opportunities. It might be that you don't necessarily get offered things, but you can always go for the things that you want, figure out what you want and ask for those. And penguins are always great, so incorporate some of those into your PhDs too. And as a summary of all of the different topics that I've been doing through all of my collaborations and tinkering with various things, I've dabbled in a lot of different topics, but the main one that I want to highlight here in the center is working on different frameworks, one of which was our tabletop games framework. So why tabletop games? That's a first question of why are we interested in these at all? Well, there's a lot of them. They have a very rich history. There, people have been playing uh, tabletop games for a very long time, and there is a great project, Lodi.games, where you can find a group from the Netherlands that are looking into historical game reconstruction. So looking at all of these games from the past that we have some information on, but we don't actually know all the rules, and they're trying to figure out how to put these back together. Um, Tabletop games are also very complex. We have large spaces that make it hard for artificial intelligence players to learn how to reason in them and make intelligent decisions. There is uncertainty. You may have hands of cards that are hidden, and an artificial intelligence player would have to figure out what is the possibility of someone having particular cards in their hand, for example. And a large challenge to these is also the social context. Can artificial intelligence players play with others for fun or just the experience of it, as humans do sometimes? There are house rules that humans put in play. How can you adapt your gameplay according to the people that you're playing with in order for everybody to have the best experience possible? Um, and there can also be very dynamic adaptive play styles that again refer to the particular players that you're playing with and the overall experience rather than trying to do well at the game. There are quite a lot of exciting developments in particular games over the year. We have some interesting games to look at here and to highlight are those with asymmetric hidden player roles in these games with a heavy social layer. So here on the left is The Resistance, which is a game where players are split into two teams and they have to sort of figure out who the good guys are, who the bad guys are, and this happens over several rounds where you have the chance to guess and bluff your way if you're one of the bad guys, hopefully to victory. And there has been some work in using deep learning, I had to emphasize this properly, to get artificial intelligence players to actually figure out how to play this game and play it well. And they even managed to surpass humans' performance. So they're very good at figuring out who the good guys are and who the bad guys are. And a very similar game here is also Ultimate Werewolf. Um, in this one, all the players have particular roles that they have to embody, and they have different actions available and different things that they can do in order to figure out, again, who the bad guys are and who the good guys are. And this is all very exciting, and there has been some work in this game as well, looking at figuring out the particular player's roles. How can you identify what role a player is, or at least their allegiance, if they're good or bad guys. And I also want to highlight here some work done by one of the iGGi students in their final year, Ivan Bravi. Some work looking at Splendor this time. This is a game with a lot of different tokens and a lot of different cards where you have to manage your resources properly to be able to handle all of the different mechanics that are in play. And even has looked at optimizing some artificial intelligence players that use statistics gathered about play styles in order to win. And he's done some really interesting work on trying to figure out not only how to get players to be very good at the games, but also to show some interesting and diverse play styles. But all of these games that have been studied, they have been studied in very different setups. All of the environments are all separate. They've tested different AI players in all of them. So wouldn't it be great if instead they were all in the same place, with AI players that are able to play all of them, and analytical tools that we can use to analyze all of the games, learn more about the games themselves, and possibly how to make them better. And that was sort of the motivation for our tabletop games framework. There are similar projects that look at board games, or sort of the more traditional type of board games, looking at chess, checkers, and so on. But we wanted to look at these complex modern board games and card games and everything that's encompassed under tabletop games. Um, so our project is looking at summarizing sort of the backbones of tabletop games, the actions, which are the things that the player does in the game, the rules of a game, which is the things that the game does, a turn order that define what order the players are going to be playing in, game phases, which are time frames with different actions or rules available, and there are different components, the game objects or pieces that are changed by all of the actions and rules that are happening. Um, so all of these different concepts, a lot of them can be summarized, and a lot of games have enough things in common that they can be brought together and made simpler to implement, and simpler to interface with a lot of artificial intelligence methods. So we've made it fairly easy to plug in a lot of different types of artificial intelligence players and analysis tools as well. And we're looking at things like game balancing to test if a game is fair to all players and does it have the right difficulty. We're interested in game testing. Does the game work right in the first place? And we're also interested in information extraction. What does the game even mean? What can we learn about the game itself? So far in the framework, we have a bunch of games. We have things starting from very simple games like tic-tac-toe and dots and boxes, to more complex deck building games like Dominion. We have casino games like poker and blackjack, and a lot of games that are still in progress, and some external contributions as well. So we're starting to gather a nice collection of games that could make up a nice library for a human collector as well. And I want to highlight in this talk one in particular, Terraforming Mars, which is something that I've been working on recently. Um, this is what the game looks like in a physical surface, and we've implemented this in the framework so that it can be nicely accessed by human players through an interface, and by AI players as well. So what this game is about, there are 1 to 5 players that aim to cooperately with terraform Mars by increasing 3 global parameters values to the maximum. So they have temperature, oxygen, and oceans that they have to increase in order for Mars to be fully terraformed and able to support life. Then players are going to play cards out of a very large deck of hundreds of cards. They place tiles on a board, manage resources in order to actually manage to achieve this goal of terraforming the planet and earning points by doing so. There are a lot of different actions that players can actually do in the game, so it is an interesting problem for an artificial intelligence player to figure out what's actually good to do at any point during the game. And at the end of the game, the player with the most points wins. This is actually a competitive game, so it's a bit of a strange one where you have to work together with the other players in order to finish the game, but then you want to be the one that contributed to that the most in order to actually win. And there's also a solo mode where the player races against time, and this is also supported in our project. So the first question that we've looked at is artificial intelligence players, are these players actually good at it at all? there is a Steam version of this game that's also digitalized, and the artificial intelligence players there are not that great. So we've tested some of the out-of-the-box artificial intelligence players in our tag framework, and their performance is actually very similar to human games, but this is if we're looking at them playing against other artificial players. Um, and then we also wanted to learn if these AI players can tell us more about the game itself. And they can. We have a lot of analytical tools that can be used to extract in-depth information on their playstyles. I'm not going to go into too much depth into what we've looked at here, but for the three parameters that I've mentioned before, the temperature, oxygen, and ocean, that have to be increased to the maximum, here at the top is a summary of what an AI player that is looking only a little bit into the future versus one that is trying to make longer plans, and sort of the priority that they give to the different parameters and how fast they manage to finish each of them. And in particular, I want to highlight the temperature parameter, where the short look ahead AI makes use of an action that is available at all times. This is not a very cost efficient action, but it's always there. And this AI player learns that it's actually good to just do that action a lot and finish increasing this temperature parameter very quickly, because that gives a lot of points and it also moves the game towards the end. Whereas the other one thinks that realizes that this action is not really that cost efficient and tries to go for a smarter, longer term plan. So there are a lot of interesting things that the players can tell us about the game itself. And we can use these to try to figure out various strategies that we can share with human players, so that when they start playing this, they don't have to feel overwhelmed by the amount of choices that they have to make in the game, but they have an idea of what's actually good to do in the game, what strategies can work here, and start playing the game from a bit of sort of kickstarting the play, as opposed to not having any idea of what actually any of these tens of actions actually mean and what to do with them. However, these general AIs, they don't actually know much about the game. They don't know how to play cards, they don't know how to place tiles on the board efficiently, and this is a huge part of human play. So we still need to tell it how to do that, or let it figure out how to. That's still part of some future work that we need to look into. And this could lead to even more interesting insight into which cards are better, and try to work that into game balancing. With hundreds of cards available, it's very hard to know which ones are actually good and which ones break the game completely. There's a summary here of various links where you can try out the framework itself. You can play around with Terraforming Mars in particular. The framework is also open source, so you can access the whole framework and play around with it at your leisure. And we also have a Discord server. The link here has a very important 2 at the end. For some reason, there was another tag Discord already on tinyurl. And we're very excited if you can join us and contribute to our endeavor here. Our main goals would be not only to advance artificial intelligence technology and make better games, but also to better understand tabletop games and how or why we as humans play them. And that is all from me. Thank you.